Hava,
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, was a Hava?
I think so. I think whatever it was that it was taken care of. I think so. Or it's going to
Okay,
happen.
good.
It's what happened today, I think.
Okay, good.
I'll follow up. I dealt with it. I took care of it. Hold on.
Okay, thank you.
Let's bring up the page. So we're learning the laws of Shabbos. We're holding chapter 90, concerning things you should and shouldn't be doing during the Shabbos. Okay. So the halacha says as follows. Law 10. So shitrei hadiotes, which is documents such as the Hainu, it means regular documents. The Hainu shitrei chayvos v'cheshbonos, bills or other letters of business. Cheshbonos is calculations. Vigros shosheil shalom, or letters of greeting. Asra afilu la'ayin vehem b'li kriya b'fiv. You cannot look at them, even if you're not going to articulate to read it out loud, even if you're just going to look at it, to read it through your eyes. Alf b'she'eni el mahar, you're only thinking. It's forbidden. Mikol makim asr, it's forbidden. V'lei amru dehiru mutter. This that we said before, that thinking on Shabbos is permitted, is ela k'she'eni nikr shemahar b'chafatzim asurim. It's only if you're thinking it's not noticeable that you're thinking about things that you shouldn't be doing on Shabbos. But here, by looking at the letter, it's obvious that you're reading the letter. That's how people read letters. Alakan shenika lakoil. It's obvious to everyone. Shemahar b'chafatzim asurim, that you're thinking about what's forbidden on Shabbos, things that are business related. Then it falls under the category of things that come out of your mouth, which you said before, we quoted before, again, the verse. Again, there's no Melachah here, but do we have the verse in Yeshaya, in Isaiah, that says that there's certain things you're not allowed to talk about that are weekly things. And by looking at a letter, especially a bill or something, it's obvious that you're studying something that's a transaction or something that's about to happen. And he even includes in that a gerus shel shalom, greeting letters. It's not something that's Shabbosdik. You shouldn't be doing it. He said it's forbidden. Hey, Rebecca. What happens if you get a letter and you don't know what it says in it? You could look at it. Maybe it's important, something that you need for your personal needs. That's important. So maybe you have to read it because it's nothing about that's forbidden on Shabbos. You shouldn't read out loud. But if it's clear, let's say it's labeled as a bill, then you shouldn't even look at it. And then it becomes something that's muksa because it's not needed on Shabbos, so you shouldn't be touching it. Again, so this basically falls under the category of mail that arrives in Shabbos. So again, there's two things that we're learning over here. Number one thing that we're learning is, again, we have the verse in Isaiah, which is the basis of this entire chapter, which tells us that you're basically the fundamentals of the verse is that your behaviors of Shabbos should not be like your behaviors in the week. Speaking things you shouldn't be speaking, etc. Going places you shouldn't be going. Although a person can say, well, I'm walking, I'm not taking a walk. But it's obvious you're taking a walk so you can get closer to the place you want to be for after Shabbos. And all the other points of the verse that we quoted. So, and part of that's very clear is that part of it is the impression you're giving off to others. We see that's very much included in the thinking of the law. Meaning, we say because others are going to see that it's going to be obvious. So we see that we're taking into account not just what you're doing, but also how it's perceived. Because a person that doesn't behave Shabbosdik, doesn't behave the way things are on Shabbos, so it's not just something that's isolated to you. You're creating an environment that's not Shabbos friendly, and bringing other people to the so to say the idea that this is either okay behavior, or bringing them also into the idea that this is something that's not not something that should be done. So we see very much in this law and in the chapter we've learned so far, you're taking into account how others perceive your behavior, because you're creating. It's not maris ayin. Maris ayin means when you give off the impression that maybe you're doing something forbidden. Over here, by others seeing it, it's creating an environment that's not Shabbos. That's what it seems to be the point over here. It's not so much because in Shabbos we have the concept called Maras Ayin, when people may misunderstand what you're doing and think that what you're doing is forbidden and it's really permissible because they don't know the details of what you're doing. So you're giving off the wrong impression, and maybe they're going to think what you're doing is A, and A is permissible on Shabbos. Over here, it's not so much about that people are going to misinterpret the law. Over here is you're creating a non-Shabbos friendly environment. All right, let's see the footnotes here. Aaron, you wanted to ask something? I see you're off mute.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask, even if it's a family letter?
He says over here, letters of greeting. Let's see what he says in the footnote. Lest you read the documents as well. Okay. So here you see he explains Melachah Shabbos and Shulchan Aruch Harav that the letter of greeting seems to be that is a letter of greeting like to the bill. It's connected to something that's to the bill. But if it's just a letter of greeting without any connection to anything, just a letter, it doesn't seem like that's what we're talking about over here. So your question is, again, what was your question? That what?
A family letter, say from your mother, your father, you don't live in the same city. She sends a letter, just happens to come on Shabbos. But my son would bring up the fact you can't even open it because you can't rip it open. So
Yeah. I'm saying let's say it comes in in an open envelope or just a piece of paper. We're not talking about that's another. What you're describing is another issue. I'm saying, but let's say let's say it was in a form that was permissible for you to open a fax. Let's say a fax. Back in the day, yeah, your fax machine was working and the fax came in, right? So could you look at a fax on Shabbos? So it seems from what he says is that things that are tzarech legufo, things that you need. Anything that you're not needing, just even if it's just a letter of greeting, your mother's writing you a letter, a holiday letter or just a letter, or your parents, whatever, what have you, and it's not necessary. You could read it on Saturday night, on Motzei Shabbos. It's not necessary for you to read now, and there's no concern that maybe there's something important for you to know now. Then obviously that would fall under the general idea of not Shabbosdik. It doesn't seem like it's as strict as what we've discussed because here we're discussing things of business, and even the letter of greeting is just an opening letter or like a opening page to the next letter, which would be a business-related document. Okay, chapter number 40. Okay, so he goes and he quotes again the pasuk, and 41 is something concerning your safety. So when he says, "What's it mean, personal need?" It's safety, a safety issue. Okay, and things that are prohibited to read on Shabbos, which would be muksa. Okay, he says that things which are prohibited to read on Shabbos, so therefore it becomes muksa because you shouldn't be using on Shabbos. Okay. He says like this: Kaisel o tavla sheyesh bo eze tzuris oidik yoinois fateretin v'kosef tachtein. This is if there's a tablet containing drawings or portions which are captionated. This is a picture. This is a picture of such, or this is a picture of such. So there's a caption. Zutzuris pliny v'zut diokin pliny. Also, likris ksav zeb Shabbos. You shouldn't be reading it on Shabbos. I feel the ayin boy beli kriya even to look at it without reading it. Also, it's forbidden. V'chein sifrei machamis v'sifrei divrei yom shel malchei umas olam. Okay, so here he goes even more. So if you have, I don't know, history books, he calls it sifrei machamis. War books or history books, different Yom's history of the nations. Let's say you have he says and he says he includes in this as well as mundane parables and books. So he says you're going to say for Emmanuel, the book of Emmanuel, the Koshkin Divi Cheshek. He includes in that and love stories, novels, romantic novels. They're going to say for Emmanuel, I feel Vukoshkin Divichechek, also the Christ and Shabbos, you shouldn't be reading on Shabbos. So to read just plain novels on Shabbos is forbidden. I feel the iron bam even to look at it like kriya befiv if you're not going to read it with your mouth. And here the Kitzur says in general you shouldn't be reading this because it's Moshev Leitzim means it's not a proper environment to be reading these kind of novels. I feel him ksuvim b'lashon hakodesh even if they're written in Hebrew. And to read novels, romantic novels, is also forbidden. It ignites your evil inclination. So therefore, it's not something you should be reading. But if there's the kind of books that could add to your yiras shamayim, your God fearing, like he says, Josephus. I'm not sure why he adds that in. I feel even if it's written in non-Hebrew, in English, let's say. You could read in Shabbos because it would add to God-fearing. I'm not sure how Josephus adds to God-fearing, maybe because it's Jewish history. But nevertheless, you shouldn't read too much of it. It's not well time spent on Shabbos. So basically, in law number 11, he's saying basically to read things that are not Shabbos related. So romantic novels, he says, in theory, you shouldn't be reading at all. And even just general books on war or history, you shouldn't be reading on Shabbos because it's not necessary. But there are books that are related to, so to say, to get to your yiras shamayim, somewhere or another, like Josephus, he says. Although I'm not sure, I'm surprised to see that the rabbis felt that was a good read to read the Josephus. We're not sure if it's accurate or not. But he adds that it brings yiras shamayim, so you could read it. Okay. So he says like this. Yes, Barbara.
I was just going to say, we were reading Josephus during the High Holy Days and Yom Kippur, and it's a very difficult read. And I don't think it's so much as they think he's accurate, as much as it's just, it is a history. And I wouldn't read it on Shabbos just because it's very depressing, especially when you get to the siege of the
Jerusalem. The temple.
Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, Jerusalem and the temple, yes.
Yeah, it's just very difficult. And so, because some of his numbers are really way off. I mean, I read it in a group of people, and we all came to the conclusion his math is way off.
Yeah, I mean, we're not. I mean, again, I don't want to comment too much because he writes over here that's a good read even on Shabbos because it brings you Shemaim. But in general, the opinion even of it seems like I understood the opinion of the Chachamim, of the rabbis, and the opinion of, let's say, more dated historians is that we're not certain if Josephus was writing necessarily positive for the Jewish people. He was a paid writer for the Romans.
He was a court sycophant, is essentially what he was.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's telling the story the way they wanted it told.
Yeah.
No, so he says. So what is the issue over here? He says, reading these captions on Shabbos lest you read prohibited documents. Okay. So we see clearly that there's certain things that seemingly are okay, but they may lead you to read things you shouldn't be reading. Okay. The Book of Emmanuel. And certainly love stories are forbidden to read on Shabbos. He says many poskim prohibit reading newspaper. Okay, this is Rebecca jumped off, but Rebecca mentioned this many times. Most poskim prohibit reading newspapers on Shabbos lest you come to read the business news, right? Because we read before, you're not allowed to read the business news on Shabbos. You can't check stocks. So says the Mishnah Berurah 30763 and the Shavus Yaakov volume 111. Is lenient. Some lean towards permitting newspapers printed in Hebrew. All right. So the Kitzur Shulchan says that if it's written in Hebrew, okay. I'm not sure in his times he had the Ma'ariv or the Idiot or the Yisrael Hayom. Maybe the papers he was reading wasn't the papers of today. I'm not sure he's referring to the local Israeli publications because they're not exactly Shabbosdik. Okay,
but what about? I read a lot, a magazine and a newspaper. Okay, so I read Mizrahi, which is the religious Zionist magazine, and I like to read the Flatbush Jewish Journal, which comes out weekly. It's a combination of news that Jews need to hear and teachings of Torah teachings.
It seems from the end of the law that we just learned, Rebecca, you just jumped off before. So we're going into the question that you asked many times about reading newspapers on Shabbos. So footnote number 44 says that according to Mishnah Berurah, you shouldn't read newspapers because it could lead to reading the business news. But the The Kitzur Shulchan says you can read in Hebrew. Aaron's asking about other magazines. It seems definitely from the last statement that he writes that you could read Josephus because it could bring to Yiras Shamayim, it could bring it to God fearing. So obviously that would include what you're reading. The Mizrah, I'm not familiar with the magazines that you're reading, but based on what you're describing them, as long as they're within the framework of halacha and definitely bringing certain ideas of Judaism into your life, then that would be a positive read.
Okay, so
Yeah,
let me just say this: the Mizrahi magazines is put together by the Mizrahi group, and you said you know about it. And the Flatbush Jewish Journal is a general free paper given out, and it has articles that would be Jewish teachings, and then there is articles that are news, either about Israel, about anything that a Jew might need to know news-wise.
Okay, so he says over here you could read them on Shabbos. Mutter to read too much. It means to send you to. I think what the Kitzur, what we were trying to build over here is that if, obviously Shabbos, especially if a summer Shabbos, it's a long Shabbos, you can't be expected to learn a whole day Torah and out of the book of Chumash or whatever your sefer of choices or your classes, etc. So a person obviously has to relax, and part of Shabbos, Onik Shabbos, is to relax and to rest, and part of resting sometimes is reading. So what we call light reading is permissible if it's within the framework of what we're talking about. Now, it shouldn't be business news, or it should be things that gives to Yiras Shamayim, like you're saying, like you're describing these publications. However, he writes, "Ein roi laharbis behem." You shouldn't spend your whole Shabbos reading them, because Shabbos should be about other things as well. Yes, Rebecca, you're on mute.
yeah. So, thank you so much. My phone died before. So I mean, basically, these magazines it's like a Torah outlook on life and on current events. But everything is from like a Torah perspective. Some of the things like give people chizuk. They, they have like strategies for handling like difficult situations, but everything is like within a Torah framework.
Yeah, so again, he writes that if you could read Josephus, these things are obviously better than that. It's mutter kloisim b'Shabbos kriya and Shabbos because it brings you Shemayim, but you shouldn't read too much. It means for some people, like especially if you have like a quiet Shabbos where you're just going to be at home and not going out and not interacting with people, and you just climb into your bed or sit on your couch on a cold winter Shabbos or summer Shabbos and just spend the whole Shabbos with a pile of magazines and books, even if the Jewish topics. He says, "Ein roi laharbis behem." You shouldn't read too much, because you have to have also time for things that are Torah related, and so directly Torah related. So and davening and making Shabbos, so it shouldn't consume your full day. But obviously, reading a bit during Shabbos is permissible. Let's see, footnote number 45. Of course, the source. Okay, right. He says if they're written in Hebrew. So he says, though the Ramah permits reading non-business letters that are written in Hebrew, the majority of poskim disagree. So the Ramah says if you have a letter written in Hebrew, so you could read it, other poskim disagree. All right, I think when he writes Hebrew, he means Lashon HaKodesh, but the Hebrew today, I'm not sure if that's included. Okay, Yetzirah, evil inclination will get ignited by the novels. Yes, Aaron. Oh, Rebecca, sorry.
Um, so actually, I was wondering about that. When I hear people like Hasidim, sometimes I hear them talking about speaking in Lashon Kodesh. Like, how is that different than Hebrew?
Modern Hebrew today, I don't know. I mean, modern Hebrew today is not exactly Lashon HaKodesh. It's modern Hebrew based on Lashon HaKodesh. So I'm saying that he writes over here that to read, if it's written in Hebrew, you could read it.
I
seems
can
to
I
me that's a bit of a stretch.
can I just give
Wait,
a thing that maybe will clarify for her? The Hasidim told me once. I asked them why they speak in Yiddish, and they say um, classic Hebrew is meant for Torah only, and Yiddish you can talk about all kinds of topics, but not in Hebrew, because then you might say something wrong, and that in regular conversation. So that's why a lot of Hasidim speak Yiddish, and that might clarify it.
I'm still confused. What is Lashon Kodesh like the written text of like the Chumash or the Sfarim in Hebrew, or is it a spoken language?
No, Lashon HaKodesh today, okay, to go back a little bit in history. The Jewish people spoke Lashon HaKodesh, but with time, and even in the Second Temple, definitely in the end of this in the Second Temple, that maybe even in the end of the First Temple, they kind of had jargon languages like Aramaic. Aramaic has the Talmud discusses the level of holiness of sanctity to the language of Aramaic. We have some things in Aramaic, and we do like the Targum, Onkelos, etc. So Aramaic was like really kind of the closest language to what we call laws, local language. It's a little bit more, let's say, a protected language than just straight up English or Latin, etc. But today Hebrew, modern Hebrew is a language that's being when he writes that you could read things in Hebrew. I don't think he means the Yediot Achronot or the Mariv or the Yisrael Hayom. No offense to these publications, because it's not like a Lashon HaKodesh publication. It's a language. It's the laws of the time, and I don't know if that's what he means, that you could read and say, well, the Idiot's in Hebrew, so I'm reading it on Shabbos. If you want to read it, but don't say you're reading it because it's in Lashon HaKodesh. It's not. It's modern Hebrew. It's not the same thing. Modern Hebrew is the language that they're speaking now, and it's not. I mean, there's all kind of words and all kind of. I mean, today it's being used for all things. It's not Kodesh, right? Lashon HaKodesh is holy. All right, he says like this: Aser limdoid b'Shabbos eiz davar im hu l'tzarech, elim kein hu l'tzarech mitzvah. You can't measure on Shabbos, so you can't put things into measuring cups or measuring spoons. An ounce cup and so the question is, for instance, if you're giving medicines, we have to discuss. Let's say you're giving your children Tylenol or Acamol, whatever, what have you, and you have to give a certain amount, a teaspoon, tablespoon, etc. So that's your health. But he says, excuse me, to do things that are not health related or mitzvah related, you shouldn't be measuring on Shabbos. Yes, Barbara.
I was just going to ask, so when Rabbi comes around and asks if anybody wants simcha on Shabbat, if I say just, I had to say just a little, I shouldn't be saying that. I should just say,
What is he offering you? I'm not following. What's simcha?
he's offering some simcha, like some whiskey or something.
Cause of simcha, nice. Okay. Yeah. No, you could say no. I hear what you're saying. He says in the footnote. He says over here it's considered uvdin l'chol weekday chore. I think it means like to pour something into a measuring cup, more like exactly 1 tablespoon.
Okay.
But if you're saying give me a shot and a shot is X, Y, and Z, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think again he says uvdin l'chol. Therefore, it's not, again. This is the chapter that's not dealing with Melachah. It's dealing with things that are not Shabbos spirited. So if you're obviously giving your children Tylenol or Advil, whatever it is, and and it says to give a teaspoon, tablespoon, or 3 millimeters, etc. So that's a measurement that's allowed on Shabbos. Okay, b'makim psida muter l'daber b'tzrachav beinim Yisrael beinim Am Yehudi. This is a very open-ended law, because it's being used sometimes. I would use the word abused a little bit by people, which is where, if you take out the brackets, right, where there is loss involved, it's permitted to discuss your business with a Jew or non-Jew. And that's why he adds the word substantial loss, because a lot of people say, well, it's hefsed meruba, it's hefsed. And a lot of people use the loophole of hefsed, of loss, to justify many things. So you have to, again, this is between you and your creator, you have to be honest if this is really something that's required to be talked now or not. But if hefsed means it's a proper loss. Let's see what the footnote says. He says, he doesn't just quotes the Bach. So not just, he quotes the Bach, but I'm saying that, again, we have to check with ourselves if it's necessary. And people use this not just for Shabbos things, but also for kosher things and Pesach things. Well, it's a hefsed, it's a big loss if I say this is not kosher, or if I have to throw out the whole cake because someone didn't check the blood and the eggs. So hefsed meruba, you have to be, this is the law that really requires a person to have their own honesty of the situation and know if you should be speaking about this on Shabbos or not, because a person could, quantify anything that's say this is a loss or a substantial loss. I called, how do you define that? Kol davar Yisrael osher lasoisei osher loimer le'eni Yehudi las. Okay, now we're crawling into the laws of Amirah la'akum. What is it? What are you allowed or not allowed to tell a Gentile on Shabbos? It says kol davar shayi. This is again a very difficult law because this is one of the loopholes of having, let's say, what we call as the Shabbos Gentile, that a person who does things doesn't have to keep Shabbos. The Gentile has no obligation to keep Shabbos. So what can he do for a person on Shabbos? And so here we're having it we're learning the Kitzur, but the laws of Amirah al-Nachiri of speaking to Gentile to ask him how and when and how you can ask a Gentile to do something for you on Shabbos is again something very questionable. And when and in what circumstances? So let's see. Kol davar shayisrael osher lasoise osher leim le'eni Yehudi lasos. Anything that you're not allowed to do, you shouldn't ask a Gentile to do. The Amirah le'eni Yehudi havish shvus. Okay, the Amirah l'akum, to just tell a Gentile to do something is a shvus. So therefore, for instance, this is where it gets questionable. Let's say you have a cleaner in your house that's cleaning, let's say, in a permissible way of Shabbos, meaning to say the payment and all that is b'havla. It's not, you're not paying specifically for Shabbos, let's say. So then you have, and the Gentile has to clean up your house. That's what he or she's getting paid for. So the Gentile could choose how they want to clean up the house. So they could clean it in a permissible way, or they could use the easy way out, which may be turning on a washing machine, right? So washing machine, you can't turn on a washing machine. But if the Gentile decided to wash the dishes in a permissible way, then it would be something else. But the Gentile chooses for his or her own convenience to turn on the washing machine because it's easier to turn on the washing machine than to wash the dishes. So he or she is not doing it for you. They're doing it for themselves because they have to get the house clean. And it's more convenient for them to turn on the washing machine. But he says, but to tell a Gentile just straight up, do something for you that you say, well, the Gentile could do it, is not, he or she doesn't have to keep Shabbos. So even if you're just hinting, also is forbidden. Again, there are obviously cases where this is permissible. I feel like Shabbos, even to hire someone before Shabbos to do something prohibited on the Shabbos, and it's clearly arranged for the Gentile to do something for you that's forbidden for you on Shabbos, even if you pre-organize it. Gam kinas is also forbidden. Also, you can't set up with a Gentile to do something for you for Shabbos. On Shabbos, after Shabbos, meaning you're telling them on Shabbos what they should do after Shabbos. Given the Melachah Nasas b'Shas Eder, he says there's two things. There's the Shvus, which is the rabbinic prohibition, and then there's the verse of Yeshaya that says it's not Shabbos thing to hire a Gentile and say, if a Gentile comes to your house and say, I would like you to mow the lawn tomorrow. So though you're setting the person up to do something on Sunday, it's not something that's not Shabbos. It's not even forbidden for you to mow the lawn on Sunday. But it's you're talking about things of the week on Shabbos, and you shouldn't be doing that. Therefore, for a mitzvah, it's mutter to be permitted to say something that is. So therefore, again, these leniencies of mitzvah. Let's say a person is a janitor or a cleaner in a shul, etc. That maybe that's a mitzvah. It's something different. Yes, Rebecca.
What about like caterers who cater like events on Shabbos and they have like waiters and waitresses and catering staff, like they're paying these people to work on Shabbos. How is that allowed?
So payment is, when I hear talking about payment, talking about hiring and instructing. The payment question we spoke about, there's that we'll get to the payment section soon. About Jews, for instance, we learned that if you're, let's say, that there's different, according to some opinions, you could take payment for Shabbos. Let's say if you're a Balkora or a Chazan, so you're doing something permissible, you're reading the Torah, which is obviously permissible, or you're leading the congregation permissible, you're getting paid for it, you're hired. So we learned last week, about different questions of when is that permissible. And best is to try to put it in a way of havla. Havla means it should be swallowed up in weekday costs. Let's say they're working, they're laning and davening throughout the week as well. Or at least to kind of negotiate the pricing based on effort of either walking, doing, preparing. So you're not getting paid for the actual work on Shabbos. But we also quoted opinions that say it is permissible. But that's talking to a Jew to do something that's permitted, just that he's getting paid for it. Here you're talking about paying a Gentile for something that they shouldn't be doing on Shabbos. or even if they can be doing on Shabbos, but if you're paying them specifically for Shabbos, if that's okay. We'll discuss those laws in a second.
Okay.
It's like this. It is forbidden. He says you may not tell a non-Jew anything that is forbidden for a Jew to do, because telling a non-Jew is a shvus. To do something that is forbidden to a Jew is a shvus, is a rabbinic prohibition. It's not, doesn't fall even under the prohibition of mimaitze chefsecha, which is this chapter, which is the verse of Yeshaya, talking about, again, there's a difference between rabbinic, which is kind of built on what is allowed and not allowed in Shabbos. Then we have the verse that this chapter is based on, which is things that are not in the spirit of Shabbos. So here we're not talking about something that's not in the spirit of Shabbos, but it's actually a rabbinic prohibition. So the shvus, he explains like this: the shvus is a rabbinic prohibition. Some permit telling a non-Jew to tell another non-Jew to do something. Okay. Others prohibit it. So says the Avodas Gershoni, and the Mishnah Brura rules that this may be done to avoid substantial loss. Okay. And this falls under the difficult conversation of hefsed meruba, because a person will say everything's a hefsed meruba. Again, my son-in-law, God bless him, told me once he worked in a place on Pesach. So he says, Shver, if I worked in the kitchen on Pesach, if you knew how many times they used the heter of hefsed meruba, substantial loss, to justify bending the law a bit, you wouldn't need in these places. So a lot of people use this loophole of substantial loss to stretch or bend the law a bit, and so one has to be very careful and honest about what you're doing. Okay. 52, he says, it's a forbidden Melachah. He says it's talking about over here that this is not due to a shvus, since the Melachah is permitted. The actual thing that they're doing is permitted, but it's just not Shabbosdik to tell someone to do it. Okay, we learned that's the verse that we said is from Yeshaya. Now the next question, we'll do one or two more laws, and then we'll open to questions and then finish the class. The Rebbe says like this. The Kitzur says like this. Afilu im hanachri bomi atzme lasses eizim lach b'shvil Yisrael. Let's say a Gentile comes to your house on their own to do something for you. You have to protest. Let's say a Gentile comes to your house to char the candles to make them nicer and they should burn better. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos because they're doing something for you, even though they're doing it on their own. Let's see the footnote here. The Magen Avram and the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Mishnah Brura, however, disagree totally. In a situation where some light is available even without the assistance of the non-Jew, permits even to indirectly suggest to the non-Jew to refurbish the candle. So it's not everyone's opinion. The Kitzur is taking on one opinion, but others say that it's permitted if he says in chapter 80, it's permitted that if there's some light and you're just adding to the light or bringing out more quality in the light, it's allowed. Again, this law is I remember clearly. Again, the laws of Amirah are very difficult. What you could say and not say to Gentile. But I'll tell you this, that I was we were in our apartment once in Crown Heights, my brother Alter and I, and an alarm. Those days, the alarms weren't like today. The alarms weren't just that they called the police. The alarms are just about making noise to scare off the intruder. And for some reason, the alarm went off, not because of intrusion, but some sort of, it was left on, what have you. Someone opened the window, and the Rebbe's secretary, Rebbe Groner, who was staying upstairs, was there, and we asked him, because he had an apartment upstairs. I said, we said to him, what can we do? It's like, it was black. I mean, it was annoying to him, annoying to us. He says, call a Gentile and give him the code. Go downstairs and find the Gentile and give him the code to turn off the alarm on Shabbos. So I didn't ask him the basis of what he said, but he told us clearly, the Rebbe's secretary, that we were able to find the Gentile, call him, bring him upstairs, and actually tell him the code. So you're actually not just telling him turn off the light, you're actually giving him information that he would not have on his own. Turning off a light, showing someone where the switch is, you could say that, the Gentile would find it anyways. It's just, you're saving time. But telling someone a code, they would never know the code if not for you giving to them. And he allowed us to give the code. So again, I don't know what the basis of what he said, but that was what he ruled us at the time. All right, any questions? Let's go one more. Okay, this is again, we're going to the question of loss. If a person sees where he says that you're threatened with a loss. He says, for instance, if your wine barrel has weakened or something like that, meaning to say that the quality is about to go off. You can call a Gentile, I mean, calling, I don't mean by phone, but to bring a Gentile in. By telling him the wine's about to go off, he's going to fix it for you. Even if it's going to be an actual melachah, an actual thing that's prohibited. So he says you're not allowed to tell him or even hint him. Just bringing him in there, when he sees it, he'll obviously know that things need to be fixed. For instance, an example, let's say, I don't know, what have you, the house is flooding or something. So you don't need to tell the Gentile. He walks in, he sees right away the situation. So he says, however, you may state in his presence, whoever prevents this loss will not lose his reward. Kind of a background hint. He says the above method should not be done unless there is a potential for substantial loss. Again, substantial loss is a very risky, open-ended conversation because one person's substantial loss is another person just being trying to take in a little extra. So you have to be honest. This is where the Torah is telling you to be honest about what's the situation. You have to be too strict on yourself, but just at least be honest with the situation. So he says, 56, however, you may not make the statement directly to him, just saying it out loud. It means you can't tell the person, I'm telling you, you won't lose anything by doing this, meaning I'll pay you after Shabbos. That's what you're hinting. He says, you're not allowed to tell to the person directly. You could just make a statement where the person understands you're talking kind of to the third party. In which case, it is also permitted to ask a non-Jew to do a shvus, to do a rabbinic on Shabbos, in a case where there's a hefsem meruba. Okay, so this is again the question of hefsem meruba. Hefsem meruba means a substantial loss, which kind of opens up to a conversation of what defines a substantial loss, and you have to ask yourself, if you're being lenient too often. Okay, I think we're going to stop here. Just getting over Purim. I'm happy we're able to do the class at all. Any questions before we close the class? All right.
No,
Okay.
not really. I just wanted to know how it's going over there and if, with the whole situation.
Like I said, we had an alarm this morning. Nothing, I don't think anything was fired because we have over here what's called a warning and then alarm. So there's a warning that maybe there'll be a firing, and then not always does it materialize to an actual alarm for whatever reason. And today I was a bit thankful because I forgot to set my own alarm, so it woke me up. So otherwise, it's things are seeming to be quiet, quieter, I should say. You can't al tiftach pelusaton, but
Yeah.
things seem to be a bit more quiet than they were, let's say, the first few hours of the war.
Okay, good. I hope it stays that way.
Hashem should protect our soldiers and the soldiers of the United States of America and all the other soldiers that are fighting this important battle for freedom and for tov, for good things. And only good things should come to those who are involved, and everyone should be safe on both sides of the battle.
Amen.
Tov, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Amen.